Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be able to welcome you all here today to the real capital, and to see all the old friends and colleagues gathered once again. And having welcomed you, I think the first thing I have to do now is issue an instruction. The usual instruction about your mobile phones, so that we won't be interrupted as we go along through our proceedings during the course of the morning. So just to think about those and switch them off if you have them. So we're assembled here today again to take stock of the work which has been carried out by NALA over the last year. You have a programme of events or an outline of the day, and you will see what we're going to be doing over the course of the day. And it's a very, from where I'm standing anyway, it's a very interesting schedule of events. You will also see that the first item on the agenda is the election of a Standing Orders Committee. And we have elected our Standing Orders Committee, and they are Marion O'Reilly and Tony Maloney. And you can see what the Standing Orders comprises of, and they will just ensure that we keep the business flowing, that we don't go over time, that when people have a certain amount of time to speak, that they that they only take the time that's allotted to them, and so on and so forth. And so that we can have a sort of a well-run meeting for the morning. So at the outset, I want to pay tribute to the NALA staff for the lovely review that they presented to us, so that before you came here, you will have received a copy of that. And you will have yourself been able to have a look at the great work that was done during the course of the year. You will have gauged from the content that it has been a very full, eventful year. A lot of energy, first of all, went into the development of the strategic plan. And you will all have received a copy of the NALA strategic plan as well in the mail or through the email. And the progression of the strategic plan, it involved an awful lot of meetings, consultations, workshops with stakeholders, and both members of NALA and members of the board they were involved in absolutely every phase of its development. And so, now that you have the strategic plan, I hope you're satisfied with it. And Inez will go into an outline of the plan in more detail later on. So aside from other considerations, drawing up the strategic plan was a very good exercise in that it provided an opportunity for reflection. And it allowed us to have a look to reevaluate the principles and the values which underpinned the organisation. And we were able to look at the changing social, educational and economic context in which the work is carried out. And one aspect of that changing context was, of course, the establishment of the Education and Training Boards and the setting up of SOLAS, which is the Further Education and Training Authority. And SOLAS will now oversee the funding and the policy direction of the further education sector. And from here on in, NALA's funding will come from SOLAS. And that's a change, because heretofore it came from the Department of Education and Skills. And we are very confident that the very good relationship we have enjoyed with the Department of Education and Skills will flourish with SOLAS. In October of last year, the very eagerly awaited results of the Adult Skills Survey, or the PIAC as it was known, they were published. And what I could take from that is that while we're moving in the right direction, in the sense that the number of Irish adults with a significant literacy difficulty has decreased from 1 in 4 to 1 in 6. But the problem is that our ranking is still poor relative to other countries. So the results really gave us no cause for celebration, and we still have an awful lot of work to do. With regard to governance matters of the agency, I would like to say that a very impressive body of work has been carried out by our audit subgroup under the chairmanship of our Treasurer, Thomas McManus. And some of the policies developed have been a reserves policy for the organisation, and dare I mention the word, a whistleblowers policy. And there has been a comprehensive review of internal financial controls. So our governance issues are under constant review so that we can ensure that we remain compliant with the voluntary code of governance which we signed up to early last year. So, and just another point I want to mention is that for those of you who were at our AGM last year, the members voted to introduce free membership, and we undertook to keep that under constant review. And I just want to let you know that I'm very happy to say that the membership has increased to over 700, and a large number of learners have availed of the free membership. Now, it doesn't preclude people from becoming individual members and paying a fee, the €25 fee, if they want to, and avail of the other benefits that can be availed of under the individual membership. Now, with regard to the order of events, you'll notice that there has been a sort of a slight change to what has occurred in previous years, in that we now have the elections will take place before our keynote speakers. So just to let you know that the outgoing members of the executive are the Vice Chairperson, Pat Ayton, the Secretary, Cora Rafter, and one of our ordinary members, Noel O'Kane. And on behalf of the executive, I want to express my sincere thanks to Pat, Cora, and Noel for their outstanding contribution and commitment to NALA over the last number of years. I also want to thank all the members of the executive for their dedication and hard work over the last year. I want to thank our director, Inez Bailey, our national coordinator, John Stewart, and all of the NALA staff. I have to say, it is an absolute pleasure to work with people of such calibre and commitment. Thank you very much. I'd now like to ask Cora, our outgoing secretary, to present the minutes of the last AGM.
Hello, has everybody got a copy of the minutes? So I'm going to give you a couple of moments just to look through the minutes. So if you haven't got a copy, can you just look into somebody else's? They should be in your packs that are on the seats. So if you haven't got a copy. Okay, yes. So rather than reading the minutes out, I'm going to ask you if you could read them in silence. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do that, and then we can see if there are any matters arising. So are there any matters arising from the minutes? And for everybody who's had a chance to read them. Okay, so if there are no matters arising, I'm going to ask if the minutes could be proposed. Have I got a proposer? So Edwin has proposed the minutes, Edwin O'Hora. And have I got a seconder? So Trevor Moore has seconded the minutes. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Cora. It's just to say to people that all of the information and the literature and the documents went out to you as members in the post. But if you didn't bring them with you today, there are other copies available down at the back. Okay. You didn't get anything in the post, and you are a member.
I did sign up there a few weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to the financial report, and I'll ask our Treasurer, Thomas McManus, to bring you through the finances.
Thank you, Greta, and good morning, everyone. I will take you through the financial statement for the year ended 31st of December 2013. You've all got a copy of this. I will preface that in giving a brief preamble in terms of the executive's responsibility, the director's responsibility in general, and that falls under two headings. One is in the context of the voluntary code of governance, which NALA has signed up to and which Greta has referenced. Under the voluntary code of governance, there are two principles, the first of which is exercising control over the organization by making sure that appropriate internal financial controls are in place and that risk is identified, assessed, and mitigated. And the second is being transparent and accountable to the organization. So that's the voluntary code. There is also a statutory code under the Companies Act, which leaves the directors, the executive, with responsibility in relation to the proper preparation of books of accounts and the maintenance of appropriate accounts at NALA. And the executive takes these responsibilities very seriously. And through the year, commissioned a complete review of the financial controls, procedures, and processes within NALA, and that was conducted during the year. The executive was very pleased with the outcome of that review, and it's appropriate that we pay tribute to Fozzie and Tines for all of the work that they did in order to ensure that that review came out satisfactorily and the controls and procedures within NALA are more than adequate. Now, Brian Murphy and Hughes are our external auditors, and they conducted their review of our accounts for the year ended the 31st of December 2013. And I'll refer you to page 5 of that report because the most important component of that report is that, in their opinion, the accounts represent a fair and true view of the state of NALA's affairs and that the accounts were properly prepared. So there were no qualifications to the accounts. In other words, they didn't have any reservation in relation to signing the accounts for the year ended December 31st. I'll give you some of the highlights from the accounts. I know that you have gone through them. You will have reviewed them yourselves, but just let me give you some highlights. Overall, the accounts were deemed to be and seen to be satisfactory by the executive. The income for the year in total was in the order of 1.9 million, predominantly from our major funder, which is the Department of Education and Skills, at least up until December of 2013. from 2014 onwards. That will be SOLAS, as Greta outlined. Now, our income funding showed a reduction of just over 7% for the year to 1.9 million. About 2/3 of that reduction came from our primary funder, the Department of Education and Skills. This reduction was mitigated very prudently by a war on costs, or cost reductions within NALA on overhead costs, whilst ensuring that the program of activities, which is outlined in the review of 2013, was maintained in the third year of a 3-year strategic plan. So notwithstanding the reduction in funding, the activities were still performed as to the planned level, and costs were reduced prudently to the tune of about 200,000. That left overall a profit for NALA of 20,000. That was also allowing for the mitigation of risk. The main risk that was identified by the executive in 2013 was that of future funding, because NALA is almost totally dependent on the funding from its primary source funder. And so the executive has a reserve policy in place, and the reserves policy calls for a reserve fund so as to mitigate that risk in the form of the ability to pay statutory redundancy in the event of no funding in the future, the ability to sustain activities for an interim period of in the order of 2 months, and the ability to live up to its responsibilities in relation to the lease of the property that it occupies. Those three call for a reserve fund in the order of 650,000 euros. The cash balances in NALA at the end of December 2013 was 630,000 euros, so adequate to cover that reserve funding in order to mitigate the risks associated with NALA. Those are largely the highlights of the accounts for 2013. And if there's no questions in relation to them, then I will propose these accounts to the floor and look for a proposer and a seconder. So Mary Hilda proposes and Pat seconds. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks very much, Thomas, for clarifying that for us. I think that was a very clear outline of the situation which NALA finds itself in at the moment. Right, so we're moving on now to the elections. And the first thing I have to do is to elect the Standing Orders Committee. Now, I've said to you who they were, and if I could have a proposer and a seconder for the Standing Orders Committee. Kevin proposes, and Laura, you second them. Okay. Right, now, with regard to our officers, the positions that are vacant are the Vice Chair, the Honorary Secretary, and the Honorary Treasurer. And because there is no opposition, there won't be an election. They have been elected unopposed. But I would like to ask the Vice Chairperson first, Teresa Byrne, who will stand up and introduce herself to the members.
evening karaoke. My name is Teresa Byrne. I'm an adult literacy organiser with what was County Galway VC and is now Galway and Roscommon Education and Training Board. I've been involved in adult literacy since 1984, so you do the maths, quite a while, both in London, Tipperary, and now I'm based in Galway. I started off as a volunteer tutor, moved through paid tutor, tutor trainer, and then adult literacy organiser. And sometimes, for my sins, I'm also involved in tutor training with NUI Maynooth, and I see one of the former participants there. You're very welcome. With NUI Maynooth and with Waterford Institute of Technology. I'm really looking forward to bringing the experience to the board and to supporting quality adult literacy practices. So thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Teresa. The nominee for Honorary Secretary is Trevor Moore. He's been proposed by Thomas McManus and seconded by Dennis Foley. And so Trevor will just say a few words to you now about himself.
Thank you, Greta. Good morning, folks. My name is Trevor Moore. My job, I work as a community training centre manager in Dublin. We used to be a FOSS-funded community training centre and now under the CDETB. We work with early school leavers, and I suppose primarily the early school leavers come with literacy and numeracy difficulties. And over the last number of years, myself and the staff, and with the support of NALA, have done a lot of work in putting together a whole centre approach to integrating literacy. And it's from that background, I suppose, that I got more interested in working with NALA. And I've been on the executive for the last 2 years. It's been an enjoyable time, and I feel like I've made a contribution, but there's also possibly more contribution I could make, and that's why I went forward for the position of the Honorary Secretary. And for me anyway, I look forward to the next 2 years with the opportunity to work further with the executive and with the staff and with the membership as well. So, thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. The nominee for Honorary Treasurer is our existing Treasurer, Thomas McManus. He has been proposed by Pat Ayton and seconded by myself. And Thomas might just like to say a few words to you.
My name is Thomas McManus. I spent 30 years on international assignments with Johnson & Johnson. I retired about 5 years ago, and I was invited by INIS to participate in the strategic planning process, and subsequently joined the board of NALA. I have a passion for adult literacy. I would like to continue to give what I can of my skills to NALA, and I would be more than happy to stay in the role of Honorary Treasurer. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Thomas. So there are 3 officers. We go now to the election of ordinary members. And as you would probably be aware, we have 5 vacancies and we have 7 members going forward. You have received your voting paper, and it is proportional representation, which means that you vote in the order of your preference in terms of 1 to 5, or 1 to 7, if you care to do that. You have also received a voting card. This is for the amendment to the Constitution, which we'll be voting on later. So our 7 nominees are Mary Bambrick, proposed by Marion O'Reilly and seconded by Pat Ayton; Mary Hilda Kavanagh, proposed by Councillor Mary Bowen and seconded by Councillor Ted Fitzgerald; Dennis Foley, proposed by Trevor Moore, seconded by Mary Hilda Kavanagh; Bernadette Hurley, proposed by Sonia Weaver and seconded by Pat Ayton; Maureen Kenny, proposed by Frances Ward and seconded by Una Dwyer; Frank Locke, proposed by Laura Foley and seconded by Tony Maloney; and Maria O'Gorman, proposed by Bernie Broderick and seconded by Michelle O'Connell. Now, I'll call on Mary Bambrick's team And Mary might like to either speak on her own behalf or she can have her proposer speak for her. Okay, so you prefer to speak yourself, Mary?
Thanks, Greta. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Bambrick. I am a volunteer one-to-one tutor with City of Dublin ETB, based in Coláiste out in Coolock on the north side of Dublin. Just to give you a brief background on myself, I am a Laois woman originally. I was educated in Offaly, the other side of the river though. My early education was in the vocational school in Edenderry and then on to UCD. My main role at the minute is that of parent. I came out of the world of telecommunications a few years ago to raise my family. But I would previously have worked in Vodafone Ireland, Ericsson, and I would have lectured down in the IT in Carlow for a few years in business and IT subjects. In terms of what I feel I can bring to the executive committee, I suppose mainly it's my role as a volunteer tutor and as a parent where I feel I can contribute. I suppose one of the key questions that kind of runs through your mind in those two roles is how best you can explain or help someone understand something that you already know. And in trying to answer that question, I have found myself constantly trying to educate myself in teaching methods, in subject matter, and especially around the ever-changing world of technology. Sorry, bear with me. And as such, I suppose I've become, amongst other things, a user of NALA's products and services, whether it's the Help My Kid Learn website, attending the tutor conferences, using the tutor resources online. So I feel, I suppose, I can be a voice for those two stakeholder groups in that regard on the executive committee. Finally, and I suppose maybe most importantly, I bring my passion for education with me. I think for my days in the vocational school, it was kind of my first introduction to the idea that students have multiple intelligences, and there's a constant need for teachers and tutors to recognise the need to change teaching methods to suit those students' needs. And it's something I have brought with me throughout my life, both in my working life and as a parent. And it's something I'll bring with me to the role. I love my Monday nights with my student. I love sitting down and going through a topic and cracking it with them. And, you know, there recently he arrived in on a Monday night glowing that he had paid his car tax online for the first time without the help from any of his kids. And his wife's always telling him the kids know too much about him. So he'd done it on himself, by himself. And that to me is worth its weight in gold. And I'll bring that commitment and that passion and that love for students with me to the exec committee that I bring to Coláiste every Monday night. So and finally, I just want to thank both Pat and Marion for having the confidence in my usefulness to nominate me in the first place, and to yourselves for listening this morning. Thank you.
Right, so we have Mary Hilda Kavanagh, and I think Mary would like to say a word to you on her own behalf.
Thank you very much, Greta. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mary Hilda Kavanagh, and I'd like to thank you all for taking my hand out on the way in. I've been nominated by Education Training Boards Ireland to contest for a position on the NALA Executive. And as you will see from the handout, I have dedicated myself to education all of my life. I was a secondary teacher for 14 years. But in 1974, while still a student and with all the innocence of youth, I contested a local election. And during the canvass and subsequently when I was elected, people came to me looking for help in form filling, and I realised that people had literacy problems. I never dreamt of that before then. These experiences opened my eyes and have made me very passionate in my support for and involvement in adult education and adult literacy. I'm a member of County Kilkenny VC, now Kilkenny Carlow ETB, for 40 years, and I chaired that organisation for over 20. I have served on the INTIS executive, and 2 years ago I was privileged to be elected to the NALA executive. I have a huge admiration for the work of NALA It does invaluable work. It's well managed, a well-run organisation that is widely respected. Some years ago, I did adult literacy tutor training, and this has informed me as a counsellor and as a voice for adult literacy in the various forums that I'm involved in: school boards of management, the board of WIT, the board of UCD, AINTIS, my own ETB, and indeed ETBI. I hope that in my 2 years on the NALA executive, I have brought my experience to the table, and I hope that I have been a voice for NALA on the various education forums that I have been involved in. It would be my privilege to serve for another 2 years, and I'm asking your support. Thank you for listening, and of course, thank you to my proposer and seconder. Unfortunately, they are not here today, but I wish to thank them anyway. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Mary Hilda. Now we have Dennis Foley, who will say a word to you about himself.
Chairman, delegates, first of all I want to thank my proposer Trevor Moore and wish him the best of luck on his new job. Kate the Fáilte go léir to everybody. Good morning, and you're all very welcome. My name is Councillor Dennis Foley. I'm a member of Carlow County Council for the past 35 years and a member of the Town Council as well. I'm joint chairperson of Carlow Kenny ETB, Education and Training Board. I'm an officer of ETBI, which is the Education Training Board Ireland. I'm on the board of NIWAC, which is the advisory committee to Minister Francis Fitzgerald in relation to youth and youth problems. Example would be anti-bullying and education. You know, cyberbullying and bullying is a terrible tragedy in schools at the moment and with young people, so that's something that we are very much aware of. I'm presently on the board of NALA and on the audit committee, and I'm seeking re-election this morning for another 2-year term. I'm looking forward to your support, and I want to thank you for your support in the past. I'm prepared to give NALA my very best and 100% for the next 2 years if you elect me again. And I think that NALA has done a wonderful job in relation to what it does in relation to literacy and numeracy. We're all well aware that's the problem at the moment, particularly people leaving national school. When they go into secondary school, we all find the problem is there, and it's time to nip it in the bud. I want to thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Bernadette Hurley is our next candidate, and you have the floor, Bernadette.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Sonia and to Pat for proposing me. I come from the corporate sector, so I'm an outsider. I have been in EBS Limited for 25 years, and I've wide managerial experience in the financial services sector. My career has spanned IT, customer service, cost reduction, process improvement, and marketing. And before my EBS Limited career, I was 11 years as a civil servant, served in numerous departments, including education. I came to the board of NALA almost 2 years ago. I have a strong interest in adult literacy. In my career, I come across adults who struggled in their workplace and in their career because of their difficulties with literacy and numeracy. So when I came to the board of NALA, this was what drove me to give my time to the board and to the organisation. I believe I have made a strong contribution. I think I have been able to bring a different perspective coming from a different sector. And I have been very impressed with NALA, the organisation, and the staff, and the work that NALA has done. So as I say, I am an outsider, and I think that is my strength. And if elected, I will continue to bring my background from the corporate sector to allow me to bring a fresh perspective to the business of NALA and to the business of the board. And I think what I set out to be, as I have been on the board, and what I will set out to be for the next 2 years, if elected, is to be strongly supportive, but also constructively challenging. And as I've said, I have wide experience. I now have a lot of knowledge and experience of NALA and the work of the organisation, and I will bring that to bear, that benefit to bear for the next 2 years if elected, along with my different background in the corporate sector. So I would ask you to support me today, and I will give great commitment to the board if elected for another 2 years, and would regard it as a privilege to serve. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bernadette. Maureen Kenny has been proposed by Francis Ward, and Maureen is going to talk to you.
Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see you all here. Thanks, Francis, for nominating me. Why did you vote for me? My name is Maureen Kenny. I'm an adult literacy organiser. I work in Cabra on the north side of Dublin. I have 21 years experience in adult literacy. I've been a tutor, I've been a volunteer tutor, I've been a tutor trainer, a coordinator, and now I'm an adult literacy organiser. Okay, so I think that's given me a lot of insight into literacy over the years. First of all, issues facing tutors, possibly, I think we'd all agree, possibly the most dedicated teachers in the education service, but the people with the least job security and stability. It's given me, because I talk to students every single day of my working life, I have a good insight into the issues, the real issues facing students. But mainly in my job as an adult literacy organiser, I find myself on the interface between the sort of huge policy decisions that are being made out there, the huge changes that are coming down on us all, and the impact that has on us, our students, our tutors, our literacy service. I think it's vitally important that people literacy workers, people who work in literacy, are represented well on the National Adult Literacy Agency. So I hope you will consider giving me your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maureen. Next up is Frank Locke.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure being here. I'd like to thank Laura and Tony for nominating me. My name is Frank Locke. As a child, I was a very sick person as a celiac. I was more times in the hospital than I was in college. I walked out of Ballally Tech at 14 years of age with very little education. I started the job initiative in 2003 and I got the opportunity to return to education. In 2003, I started down at Pearse College. Francis Ward is the ALO, and then I went to Crumlin. I spent an absolutely fantastic 7 years. For somebody who never done the exam of their life, my tutor, Tressa Collins, says to me, "You're doing the junior cert in 2006. I couldn't believe it. I got it in maths and English, and I got 2 Bs. The same year, I appeared on the TV finale on the Useful Guide Towards the Numbers. In 2007, my tutor says to me, "Prepare yourself for your leaving cert in 2009, Frank." I thought this was unbelievable. I said, "This is only for people with brains." And she says, "What you're doing on paper there," she says, "that's what you're doing in your exam." It was absolutely fantastic. I couldn't believe it in the English, and I got a C. Once again, it was absolutely brilliant. I went back and done the maths again in 2010. And unfortunately, through the cutbacks, I had to give up then in 2011. It's been a pleasure. I was invited. I've been going to the student days from 2004. I was invited by Michael Power and Kevin O'Duffy in 2009. Would I like to join the NALA Student Subcommittee? I never knew what it was, never thought it was. This is my 4th year on it. It's been fantastic. To listen to the students on the student days and hear people talking about their problems and the literacy that's out there today. I would love the opportunity. The 4 years I've had on the Student Subcommittee, I would love the opportunity to be elected is to go on and pass my experience on to other people out there. I'm always encouraging people to go down and see Francis Ward in Crumlin College and to get them back to education. She knows that, she's laughing. But once again, it's been a pleasure and a treasure, and I would love just the opportunity is to give somebody out there my experience, what I've learned, and to encourage other people to get back to education. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Frank. Have we Maria O'Gorman?
My name is Bernie. I'm a coordinator in a family centre in Kerry, and Marie is a director on that family centre. Marie is also a member of the local authority, and she's not going forward in the next election. She's devoting all that time to what she has experienced in her role as a local county councillor, the level of adult literacy that she has experienced, and has promised to dedicate her time to working on behalf of the people that she has been working for. You would be getting a very valuable candidate in that her vast experience. She's on the local ETB board, she's on the National Forum of Family Centres, she's a regional authority. They're too numerous to mention, but she is stepping down from everything and devoting her full attention as a volunteer with NALA I would hope you would support her. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Right, now you have a very difficult decision. We have 7 excellent candidates and we have 5 places. So we'll give you a few minutes now to fill in your voting sheet, and the ballot box is at the back of the room, and as soon as you're finished you can just put your ballot into the ballot box and we'll come straight back when you've done that, and we'll look at the amendment to the Constitution. We have one minor amendment to the Constitution. This is to bring it into line with normal practice. It has been proposed and has the full support of the Executive, and I'm presenting it to you today on behalf of the Board. And we are proposing to amend the Constitution to say at least 6 members must be present before the Executive Committee can take a decision. And that's a change from at least half of the members plus 1 must be present before the Executive Committee can take a decision. Okay? Right, so you have your voting card. Everybody has one of these. So all those in favour of the amendment, would you please hold up your voting card? Okay, now we'll ask Inez Bailey to give you an overview of the work of NALA in 2013 and the key priorities for 2014. Do you want to do this now?
That's great. Morning, everybody. Great to see the crowd here today. My job is really just to give you some of the highlights of the agency's work in 2013. All well documented in this document, so anybody who is a member of NALA would have received this, but there are further copies if anybody wants to look at it. But I'm going to try and do my piece of work through a few pictures so that it might bring to life some of the work that we've been doing as opposed to relying too much on print. But first, just to remind people that really the vision of NALA is to work to progress the area of adult literacy and numeracy with a whole range of different partners, and to advance the whole area of policy, practice and access. So they're the 3 kind of thematic areas that we work in, and all of our work falls under those headings. And in the policy area, the most significant piece of work we were involved in last year related to the legislation that was drawn up by government to underpin the setting up of both the Education and Training Boards and SOLAS. And this lady here, her name is Olive. Some of you may know her. She is a fantastic student advocate who is very involved both in the student committee in NALA, but also in a lot of promotional work. She's based in a centre in Tala, and Olive had the fantastic strength to go in front of an Oireachtas Committee on Education and Science and talk about why she thought learners should have their own seat on the Education and Training Boards when that legislation was being discussed. There wasn't a designated learner seat. There were a lot of stakeholders' seats mentioned, so parents had a seat, staff had a seat, but there was no designated seat for learners in Education and Training Boards in the legislation when it was first drafted. So NALA campaigned to get a designated seat for adult learners on those boards, and Olive spoke to that motion in the Oireachtas, and she received a fantastic response from the committee, and they gave their full support, and the legislation was amended and it was passed that all Education and Training Boards will have a representative of adult learners. An actual adult learner will come and sit on those boards when the new boards are created later this year. So that was a big piece of work for us and a big focus of our attention during 2013. And Olive did us proud in terms of putting forward why she believed that was something learners wanted. Another project we were involved in was around the whole area of unemployment. And these are 3 kind of likely lads who came from the area of South Dublin, who were all unemployed, and they were referred by the Department of Social Protection to join a Momentum-funded project around coming back into education. The project was very interesting insofar as it was only targeted at people who were aged between 18 and 25, and the agency worked very closely with the local employment service in that area to support this group of young people. And all of the people who participated in the project either attained a qualification, and in some cases people actually got jobs as a result of the project. So it was a kind of a contribution from the agency to the whole area of tackling unemployment, which, as you know, is a major government priority, but also the large numbers of people who are experiencing unemployment means that there's quite a lot of strain on services to meet all of the demands that are there. We had reference already to the Adult Skills Survey, or PIAC as it was being called, and these are the results, so I won't labour them, but really to say we still have, according to these statistics, quite a large issue with literacy and numeracy difficulties in our population. And the agency spent a lot of time last year promoting the outcome of that survey, bringing it to the attention of policymakers in particular. And this individual, his name is William Thorne. He's a senior analyst in the OECD who have responsibility for that survey being carried out internationally. And he came and he spoke, he met politicians, policymakers, as well as people working in education and training boards, and he explained an awful lot about the survey, what it tells us, what it will do in terms of informing future education and training policy and practice. On the practice side, we did a lot of work throughout the year with literacy tutors and numeracy tutors, and I just focused in here on a numeracy practice session with a guy called Daniel Sellers. He's a numeracy consultant who worked a lot in Scotland, and he now lives in Ireland, and we've been able to bring him to a number of events to enhance the quality of the work that's happening in the whole numeracy area. As you might know, numeracy doesn't get as much attention often, both in policy terms or in practice terms, and there is a desire now to see more and more tutors and more services available on the whole area of numeracy. So we spent a lot of time in 2013 providing practitioners with learning events around the whole area of numeracy, and these were both supported by 2 research publications. One specifically around numeracy tutors and their needs, and another one looking at case studies of practice that could be shared with other practitioners. Help My Kid Learn, another project that we promoted during 2013. It's a website for parents, guardians, grandparents who want to have fun learning opportunities that they can share with children. It's a really, really interesting site, and as you'll see there's a picture of a mobile phone, because a lot of people are accessing sites like this on their mobile phone. And it just shows you there, you can just about catch it, that really what people will do here is they will just look on the site, they'll put in the age of the child that they want to look for an activity around. It'll pull up a range of activities around reading, writing, numbers, and they can pick up some fun learning activity they want to do with the child and use it there and then. So it's really a resource for parents, but it's also being used by people who are working in the childcare sector. And the idea behind it is it supports children from the age of 0 to 12 in their development of literacy and numeracy skills, because we know that these things start when children are born, and they don't just happen when children go to school. But often a lot of children do need a lot of support in this area, and parents often are very tight for time, and this is just a handy way for them to get some quick, fun ideas that they can use. And during 2013, as you can see, 85,000 people visited that site. So it's a very big success story in terms of the numbers of people who are using it. The family project, which was kind of connected into this whole area around family literacy, was on our screens in 2013. It had aired on RTE1 at 7:30. We had 190,000 viewers for each programme. There were 6 programmes. this is one of the families, two of the families, sorry, who featured in the programme. These are people who volunteer to get involved in television programmes to talk about learning in their home, and they were both helped by kind of celebrity mentors around things that you can do that will enhance a family learning activity. So the programme was really, really successful. We were delighted with it. It was the first time we'd been involved in a project like that, and it is going to be on air again in 2014. A new series is actually being produced at the moment. Fran O'Neill, another fantastic learner advocate, who during the year gave his time to promote the cause, I suppose, of coming back to education. He himself came back into learning and got so much for it, a bit like Frank saying it earlier on. He decided he wanted to actually tell his story, and we're very dependent on people who are willing to do that and who will share their story with the media. So during the year, Fran featured in the Irish Independent, big huge spread on him I think at the time, and overall we had around 190 mentions of literacy that resulted from our own kind of press work during the year. WriteOn.ie is a learning website that you might be familiar with. It's really supposed to be supporting, I suppose, some learners who feel they either can't access traditional face-to-face tuition for whatever reason. So it was really plugging that gap and developing the whole idea of distance learning. So during the year, 490 people used the distance learning service within NALA. The site itself, as you can see from those numbers, actually has far more people using it for a whole range of purposes, including tutors who will use it with learners who they're working with on a face-to-face basis. So it has become, I think, a great resource and support to learning activity in local centres all over Ireland. Finally, in the area of plain English, you're probably familiar that we promote the use of plain English, and in 2013 we bid for an international conference to come to Ireland to focus on the whole area of plain English, and we won that bid, which means that in 2015 we will have this international conference in Dublin Castle, focusing in on the whole area of plain English, plain language, what's going on in other countries, but also showcasing the work that's happened in Ireland. But a lot of work had to go into the bid to beat other countries who had actually also wanted to bring an international conference to their shores. So once again, a little bit of the contribution I think that NALA is trying to make towards getting more and more people to come into Ireland, a bit of the gathering kind of phenomena there, and finding a particular niche for us in the whole area of plain English and plain language. So that was another development during the year. And before I move on to priorities for next year, just to mention these are individuals who are involved in the whole area of health literacy. This first individual is a GP. He spoke about his work supporting his patients in Dublin who have literacy and numeracy needs that actually impede their taking up of medication and using medication properly, and how he as a GP takes responsibility for how he communicates to them, so that he takes the emphasis off whether or not they can read all the information he would supply to them, and puts the emphasis on how he communicates to them and making sure that he's doing everything he needs to support them. And the lady at the end works in the HSE, and she talked a little bit about how the HSE is trying to develop its own communication better and be more aware of the fact that there are people with literacy and numeracy needs, and that health messages need to be delivered in more accessible language, and there needs to be support for people to develop their health literacy. So another kind of an interesting developmental area that the agency is involved in. Greta mentioned very quickly that we have developed a new strategic plan to take us forward, and there are copies of it available if anybody wants to really get into the detail of it. But once again, we're focusing in on the three key areas of policy, practice and access, but we've kind of changed it a little bit to identify the fact that behind those three words are actually people. So during the next few years, we'll be focusing our attention on supporting policymakers who have the responsibility to implement the policy area that relates to literacy and numeracy in the wider education and health settings. So there are areas that we're working with people who work in both the Department of Health, Department of Education, and indeed SOLAS. On the practitioner side, we're saying actually we're going to work with practitioners mainly working in the whole area of ETBs, but also people who are working in the disability sector to provide them with professional development opportunities if they wish. And finally, the whole area of access, we're kind of renaming that to actually name what it is about. It is about ensuring that the message around adult literacy and numeracy continues and gets out there to the general public, and that learners feel that they can be part of that process around promoting awareness, but also feeding back to the agency about what they think is happening in the whole area of learning, what they would like to see happen into the future, and provide that kind of a channel for their views to be fed back into the system, in particular at a national level. So that is a very quick whistle-stop tour of the work that the agency engaged in 2013, which is all further documented in this report, and also then the priorities going forward for the next few years, which are detailed in the strategic plan. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks very much for that, Inés. Now we'll move on because we have a very exciting and innovative development here this morning, in that we are delighted to welcome our next speaker, David Putnam, who is joining us by a live video link. And David is an award-winning film producer, and in 2012 he was appointed by the Irish government as Ireland's first national digital champion. And the role of the digital champion is to provide leadership and to help achieve the targets set out in the National Digital Strategy. Now, he is also the chair of an online education company based in Ireland that delivers interactive seminars to colleges around the world. And his address will cover the possibilities of ICT learning for adult learning.
Okay. Good morning. Hi, how are you? Perfect. I hope you've been having a good meeting so far, and that you've elected all the right officials and have made all the right decisions. I'm about to come in and destroy all that. I want to talk to you about a number of things, and I saw the press release that went out last night, and that's pretty well what I'm going to address. But I'm using technology. I believe in technology fiercely, but I thought probably the best thing I could do is kick off with a very short piece from the BBC that describes exactly both my challenges and my fears. So I think you'll enjoy this, and then we'll get cracking. Here we go. 30. Okay.
So the question we asked ourselves is, how would it be if things didn't have to be the way we know they actually are, yes? What would a world look like if it was different?
New Broadcasting House was designed and built virtually from the ground upwards, and there are regular digital handshake sessions for new staff. Today's run by Senior Technical Services choreographer Adam Brady.
The whole point about intuitive technology, as opposed to intelligent technology, which is basically just lights going on and off in toilets, yes? The whole point about intuitive technology being that it comes preloaded into the building itself, okay? Welcome to your virtual PA. One unified system that changes the game, integrates your world, syncs you with everything and everyone around you without you doing anything, syncs you to the BBC itself in real time, wirelessly, continuously, and in real time. 11 years in development. Guys and everyone, I give you Syncopatico. Fucking hell!
Okay, I guess in a sense that's my nightmare, but it's also the way that an incredible number of educationalists view technology. They review it as and they're not always wrong. They review it as a combination of gobbledygook and failure. And we all know one thing for certain. Once that's happened in a classroom, you've lost the class. So the whole plug and play, reliability, all of those things are an absolute given and lie behind everything I certainly want to say this morning. The technology does work. You're looking at now. I teach from here every Monday and Friday. I teach all over the world, which I'll explain in a moment. but I do absolutely rely on the technology. Now, interestingly, I'm not a technologist. I'm no techie. I just want to switch it on and have it work. And I get pretty irate if ever it doesn't happen. Now, in fairness, over the last 2 years, it's only let me down twice, and one of those was our fault because we allowed it to overheat. So, am I a convert to technology? Absolutely. Am I sometimes fearful of it? Yeah, that would be the case as well. I'll vanish for a bit because I've got a lot of slides to show you, but I'll pop back and certainly want to answer any questions you may have in a few moments. So let's move on. This is the other challenge. Constant change. This is not going to go away. We're faced with it, and it's going to bewilder and befuddle and trouble us for a long time to come. But one of the facets of that constant change is the challenges that we in the education world are having to face, and they're very, very real. My guru, if you like, is a man called Tom Friedman, who is a journalist with the New York Times. I read him avidly. I think he's absolutely got the plot, because I think he understands the problems, the fears, the challenges, and the opportunities. And I would, if there's any one person I would recommend that you follow, it's Tom Friedman, New York Times. Not long ago, about 6 months ago, he said this, and it's quite challenging. In the past, workers with average skills doing an average job could earn an average lifestyle. Today, average is over. That's, as I say, for many, many people, that's a very frightening statement, but I think it is profoundly true. I'm not really sure that average was ever adequate, and I doubt very much that many teachers in schools, colleges, universities ever really were attempting to seek average. But average was a kind of default position you could relax into, and it's been, I would say, effectively removed from us. So we're dealing with a generation of young people who are embarking on a journey with almost no map. I go so far as to say that for the first time in history, literally in the history of humanity, we're dealing with a generation of teachers who are being required to teach young people and prepare them for a world that none of us adequately understand. They're going to be dealing with challenges and issues and problems that, frankly, we can barely get our head around. We've read a great deal about the fact that 70% of the jobs by 2030 will be jobs none of us ever thought of. And if you think of it in the context of, for example, my iPad that I'm tied to, 5 years ago, not only didn't I have an iPad, I didn't even know I needed one. There was no real reason to assume that this thing that I now rely on as a fundamental tool of my working and indeed social day in a way, I didn't have any idea that it wasn't going to be important to me. So I think if you look at the challenge in the next few years in that context, we're likely all to come up short. And we're also dealing with another nightmare. Youth unemployment in Europe at 22.8%, it is utterly unsustainable. The idea of a generation of unemployed and unemployable young people, and the fact that we can move into second and even third generations of unemployment is not thinkable. We don't, certainly here in Ireland and in Europe generally, we simply don't have the resources to underwrite that. And so we're looking at one or two solutions. One is to alter our own lives and our own expectations downwards in order to help fund the implications of this level of unemployment, or to make absolutely sure that 22.8 gets cut to 2.8, at which point it does become affordable to offer a human and decent lifestyle to the people who remain, for whatever reason, remain unemployed. You just saw me, but I thought I'll show you a quick video, it's 4 minutes long, of what I do from here in West Cork, and the way in which I work with my students. I hope you find it enjoyable. I still enjoy watching it, despite the fact it's over a year old now. Here we go. So here's where I work from, here in West Cork. I'm to be found in this office most Mondays and Fridays, teaching in classes all over the world, and I love it. I really, really love it. I think we're beginning to make a serious difference. The technology is extraordinary. The interactivity is, for me, perfect. And thus far, the students we're teaching seem to really enjoy it. What comes back to us is they love being part of 21st century learning, which I suppose is what we set out to do a couple of years ago. In this room, I've got all the equipment I need. I can look at the large screen, which shows me what my students are doing, and I interact with them. The smaller screen shows me where the next clips are going to come from, what they are. I work from a computer here, I work from my iPad there. My iPad gives me notes up on the iTV. And it's very, very enjoyable, wholly interactive experience. And I do feel it's part and parcel of the wave of the future. Certainly, our students feel that way.
Cinema and television, in my judgment, are without question the most socially influential mass media of the early 21st century. Over the next 10 sessions, I'm going to try and take you through not just my own career, but the films that influenced me, and I think the films that allowed me to make the choices I made. This is an interview from 25 years ago with Bill Moyers for PBS.
The creative community is supposed to be the group who are pushing, using their strengths, using their power, using their talents to push against what is into what may be.
Now let's interrogate that a bit, and I'd really like to hear from you.
Hello, David.
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Hi, David. My question relates to how you worked with the key creatives during the process of filming.
On the set, be there at the beginning, be there at the end, and be there when you need it.
Is there still a hunger or an appetite for the mission type films in today's movie-going audience?
What those films were, I would argue, was a salve. They allow people to feel that there was a better world out there, and that they themselves were capable of better. And I think that is the role of filmmakers. Politicians, by definition, can never be part of moving society forward, because they're always trying to catch up with where society is. Our job, your job, is to move society forward. The film is yours, it's the writers, it's the directors. It has to come from within you. If it doesn't, it's empty, and it's a product. Everything is about the choices you make. Everything. Not just the people you work with, the themes you choose, the way in which you conduct your life, the things that are important to you, the way you use your time. It is all about choices. Our job is to be difficult, because despite everything I've just said to you, I actually think cinema can represent hope, but it only will represent hope if you believe it, and if you believe the medium is powerful enough to deliver that. So I would have thought for an overall a title for the whole series of 7.5, yeah, the Cinema of Hope would be something that I'd be very, very comfortable with.
See you very soon.
That film was made by my students in Brisbane, Australia. Why Brisbane? Because we deliberately chose Brisbane to address the issues of distance and make sure we could crack them. So what do I teach? I teach creativity, and I teach a core belief of my own, which is that creativity is a muscle. Of course there are geniuses, there are a few geniuses. Can't teach them any more than you can influence the lives of oligarchs and the mega wealthy. But I do set out these, as it were, 5 issues which contribute towards creativity. And the one I stress, and I'll come back to this later, the one I absolutely stress is resilience. I try to teach my students to be resilient, to know how to deal with all the nightmares, problems, dramas and everything else that's going to inevitably be thrown at them. And they like this slide a lot. I encourage them to join a gang. Interesting enough, they prefer the word gang to the word team. They're sick to death, I think, of being told about teams, but they like the idea of joining a gang. And what I suggest to them is, if they can find a gang of like-minded people with similar aims, similar ambitions, similar commitment, similar resilience, they are much more likely to succeed, certainly through the early years of being students and out into the workplace. So, being a member of a gang is regarded as important. I also teach what I call the first law of creativity. That which is merely competent or even good is only a point of departure. It's seldom, if ever, a point of arrival. That's what I was taught as a very young man working in advertising, and if anything, I believe it more today than I did then. But for a lot of students, that's quite a painful journey. It really is a painful journey. The idea of going back over their work again and again and again, improving it by iteration, that's a big ask. So what do I encourage in them? I encourage talent, I encourage imagination, commitment, and belief. If I can begin to get those concepts working, then I know that I've got a chance with them. Each student, and every one of you know this is true, asks who I am and what can I be. That is the core question. And I use cinema to show them how that cinema is about identity. It's about identifying with the people on the screen. The reason that actors and actresses are good looking is because we effectively loan them our identity. They're us. They're playing out our dreams, our ambitions, our fears, our dramas are all being played out. And so what I try to encourage mostly young people that I teach is that they've got to take their own dilemmas, their own issues, and allow the audience that you address, be it in still terms, in advertising or in movies or in television, to identify with who and what they are. Now, we all start from somewhere. Here was my journey. What did I want to be? I wanted to be a rock and roll star. And interesting enough, this line that I use here, "Show me the boy who never wanted to be a rock star, I'll show you a liar," is a line I actually used to promote a movie of my own in 1974 called Stardust. So it was a kind of recurring issue. But in fact, that didn't happen to me. This happened to me. I became a young advertising messenger in 1960. And that's where my journey started. But I was very, very, very lucky in that, first of all, I'd left school at 16, realised by the time I was 18 that I'd possibly made a catastrophic mistake and started going to night school. But also, the ad agency that I joined, it was actually the third agency I joined, was named Collett Dickinson Pierce and became the outstanding ad agency in the UK. So effectively, CDP was my university. So I had a combination of going to a paid university during the day and going to night school 3 nights a week. At the same time, I got married. Our daughter was born. It was a tough, very, very tough school to grow up in, but a good one. And here's what I learned. And there's a very important reason I'm using this slide. At CDP, the agency, we were actively encouraged to be fearless. Now, I don't tweet, but what I do is I look. That's to say, I check on the tweets of students or people I've lectured to see what it was that interested them or what they picked up on. By far, the most frequent tweet, by far, is this one of being encouraged to be fearless. And I've become convinced in my own mind that we've got a generation of young people who wish to be allowed to be fearless. But unfortunately, for a whole variety of reasons, some defensible, some indefensible, we're doing the opposite. We're, if anything, encouraging them to become fearful. And I'm not sure that we can build a country or a continent in Europe or a global society based on fear. So in fact, that experience that I had was important. Now, one of the questions you're asking yourselves, I know today, is the issue of funding, where it's going to come from, how it's going to emerge, how do you go for it? So what's clear to me, and I've worked the last 16 years in Parliament and in the House of Lords, is that politics is all about priorities, choices and priorities, and trying to get those priorities right. But it's also trying to get them right in the context of becoming elected. Now, there are huge, multiple choices facing politicians of all colours and all parties. And they're set out here, really. Their education versus energy security, their education versus social security, their infrastructure versus defence, their health versus energy security. To take that matrix and make the right judgments is damn difficult. But the one thing I would say, the reason that education is right at the top, isn't just because that happens to be my avocation. It's also the fact that only education, only a brilliantly educated generation of young Irish men and women can allow us to afford any of those other completely desirable elements. We can't have a successful health service built on anything other than a successful education system. We can't afford energy security or social security based on anything other than a brilliantly educated young generation of young men and women who generate themselves the income to make the rest of the pattern affordable. But here we come up against another one of the problems. I shared a platform January of last year with Larry Summers. Larry Summers was the ex-Secretary of the Treasury in the US. And he made this remark, that change takes longer than you expect. When it does occur, it happens faster than you ever believed possible. There's 2 points I want to make here. One is he was particularly talking about the 2008 financial crisis. And he said that from 2005 onwards, the American Treasury knew there was a problem. They thought it was an affordable problem, they thought it was a dealable problem, and they even had contingency plans. The problem was that nothing happened in 2006, and nothing happened again in 2007, to the point that if you actually started talking about this problem, you were just a doomsdayer, you were kind of painting a doomsday scenario. What happens? September 2008 happens, and the changes that you've been expecting happen faster, but also far more catastrophically than anything you expected. He estimated the actual crash in 2008 was 2 to 3 times as bad as the worst scenarios that had been painted earlier. And I think the same is true regarding teaching and learning, that we are going through a process of change, that in a sense, and for a number of perfectly defensible reasons, we've held off some of those changes, partly because we are fond of the way in which we work, and partly because we're slightly insecure and worried about what the change might bring. But the truth is, that change is now literally upon us, and we're having to address it and deal with it. But it's always been there. You've got to be as old as me to recognise this. My clear memory, in about 1950-51, was the very first radio being rolled into the classroom of my grammar school. I just started at grammar school. And at 10 o'clock exactly, a radio was rolled in by a rather reluctant teacher. It was switched on and a voice boomed out, "Good morning, children. This is your history lesson for," I can't remember what lesson it was. And we sat, and it didn't really work, but it was a use of technology. The problem was, it created far more trauma in the staff room than it ever did in the classroom. The staff at my school honestly believed that the beginning of the end had arrived, and that their jobs were in danger, and that this damn thing, this radio, at some point was going to become sophisticated enough to take over everything. That not only did it never happen, it never was going to happen. But the problem was that we were encountering something that was really very troubling. Now, every single one of you in the room will either recognise or remember what I'm about to show you.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? A tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone, raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
Now, I won't embarrass you by asking you to put your hands up, those who actually recognise or remember a class like that. But the truth is, there are far too many of them, and there almost certainly are still too many of them. I've always thought that the 11th commandment should have been, "Thou shalt not bore." Because I would actually say 2/3 of my school experiences, in one way or another, echoed what you've seen. Of course, there was a brilliant exception. She happened to be called Miss Kirkpatrick, and she was my history teacher, and I've been left with an absolute passion for the whole of my life for history. But there was also Mr. Stabler, the maths teacher, who left me with a lifetime loathing of mathematics. And you can't do that to young people. I mean, it's just not possible. We also have a brand new challenge. I've just come back from Southeast Asia, just literally a week ago. I've got this strange title. I am the Prime Minister, the UK Prime Minister's Cultural and Trade Envoy in Southeast Asia. And twice a year I do these swings through a number of Southeast Asian countries, looking at ways in which they are evolving and ways in which their ties and their relationships with the UK can be improved. And the most important thing I've come across is this. Quite incredible levels of parental engagement and self-sacrifice. 30% of disposable income of middle-class families goes into their children's education. 30%. 74% of Asian couples, parents, are actively investing and saving for their children's education. The great dream, of course, being a university education in an English-speaking country that's safe and offers the opportunity of basically of security for the family. These families, remember, they don't have social security. Their only long-term security, their old age pension, if you like, is their child's education. To an extent, I think it's a shared view here in Ireland. I think there is a sense that the education of young people is a fundamental component of old age security. It certainly isn't true in the United States, and it certainly isn't true in the UK. So we're dealing with a part of the world which absolutely knows that its future is completely bound up with the quality of its education and the ability to afford it. Last December's PISA results were an eye-opener. Shanghai, as you remember, came out top by rather a long way. And the really interesting take I got from Shanghai was this, that 70% of teaching of teachers' time was spent in the classroom, and 30% was spent in lesson preparation, professional development, including watching other teachers teach, and familiarity with the opportunities created by technology. 30%. That's a sort of work split that's almost impossible for us in Europe and certainly here in Ireland to even imagine. But that is what's driving the Shanghai education system, and it is the differentiator that's making it the best. And I was very lucky. In January I had dinner with Andreas Schleicher, who was responsible for the PISA results. And I said to him, Andreas, have you got any kind of heads up, any sense of what the results in 3 years' time are going to be? He said, yes, I'll tell you now. He said, one of the great criticisms I'm getting from the US is that, China's only entering Shanghai for these results, and Shanghai is completely different from the rest of China. He said, in 3 years' time, we will prove that rural Chinese schools are outperforming US schools. He said, when that happens, a real wake-up is going to occur. So where does all that lead me? It leads me to this. That a country that fails to value its teachers fails to value its future. I believe that absolutely profoundly. And I think we've got to have to wrap our heads around that concept and realise the implications of it. Now, it's not all bad news. My kind of most enjoyable job, I suppose, is I chair the Times Educational Supplement Advisory Board. It's a fantastic job and a very enjoyable job. And 5 years ago, we created a social media site encouraging teachers to share their lesson plans and work with each other on constantly improving their practice. And this is where we've got to. Now, this is particularly, this is a slide I quoted for the US. It's gone through the roof, absolutely gone through the roof. I don't know how many of you can read that, and I'm very happy to make these slides available to you, to anyone who wants them afterwards. But almost 60% of US teachers search online every single day to source classroom content. And they look for recommendations from other teachers. And what's that resulted in? Well, TES alone connects more than 70 million teachers and students globally. Bear in mind, this didn't exist 5 years ago. Didn't exist. This was, if you like, the stuff of our dreams when I worked at the Department of Education between 1997 and 2002. And those numbers are real. They're very recent and they're absolutely real. Almost more amazingly is the speed at which teachers downloading is growing. 27% year on year. And amongst the fastest growing, which is fascinating, are Ireland and the US. And it isn't just downloading. The growth of resources by teachers, putting material up on the site to help other teachers, is also growing exponentially. Last month, at the end of last year, 703,000. We're now actually at around 720,000. 720,000 resources. And here's the real kicker. 85% of those resources are created by teachers for teachers. It's a really staggering number. Sorry, 750 in March. Teaching possibly is the oldest, that's arguable, but it's certainly the largest profession in the world. And again, there's some extraordinary numbers. And the top 5 non-UK countries on the network are those, and Ireland being number 5. And so it's quite remarkable, the speed with which this has taken off in Ireland. And look at along the bottom. The textbook industry, the industry we've relied on for the last 100 years, is worth $7 billion at the moment in the US, despite textbooks only being used in 34% of lessons. That is a really, really amazing statistic. So, here's the point. While I've been speaking to you, literally since I switched on, we did this number yesterday to double check it, between 12 and 15,000 teaching and learning resources will have been downloaded in 93 countries. Again, I repeat, 85% of which were originally created by teachers and for teachers. So, we're moving on to the issue of teachers as learners, and I think this is a very, very important component. It's something certainly you're going to be touching on today. I believe no teacher can consider themselves fully trained, fully equipped, unless they literally know how to clip and make resources. I've put up here 3 video editing software resources. The top 3 there are absolutely free. The second band are very inexpensive, and the bottom group are more expensive and more sophisticated. But there is absolutely no excuse whatsoever any longer for a teacher not to spend time learning how to clip, edit and create content. And just in case you wonder where the knowledge comes from, again, the top 3 there, the top 3 sites that make this possible are all free. Only the bottom 2, the 2 in the bottom corners, have any cost attached to them. So there's honestly no ongoing excuse not to become a teacher/content creator. In fact, I would argue it makes the job twice as interesting and certainly makes your the opportunity of students, whatever age they might be, a lot more fulfilling. The other job, which I've got literally until Monday night because I retire after my 7 years, is I'm Chancellor of the Open University. Here I am last September giving an honorary degree to Mary McAleese. It's been a wonderful job to have. I've loved it, and as I say, when I step down on Monday evening, it'll be sad. But it's been an incredible period because during the period of my chancellorship, the OU has moved from being essentially a TV-based distance learning operation to a digitally based learning operation. And that's obviously offered up enormous opportunities to us. I just want to run through some of those for us. But first of all, I'll start off with a 1.5 minute clip on OpenLearn, which is what the system we launched about 18 months ago, and which has proven to be a huge success. So what's made all this possible? Well, it's been made possible by one of the greatest marriages, I think, that have ever occurred, certainly in education or anywhere else, and that's this. Education has met social networking. It's created a completely different world and a completely different set of opportunities for learners of every age. I mean, what's going on is pretty phenomenal. I mentioned that OpenLearn is a success. This is the kind of numbers we're achieving, and these are the number on the right-hand side, the number of sites and means by which we're able to deliver learning. This is a useful little thing. This is, I would say, a kind of an illustration of what would have been the traditional pathway to learning. Quite a lot of steps, paths. You keep hitting each step, you're going to go up that ladder. This is the pathway for informal learning. It's gentler, it's in your own time, and at your own pace. And it also has something very, very important attached to it. What I think learners are beginning to realise is it's less about accreditation, much more about knowledge and understanding. I'll illustrate that in a moment when we look at the most popular lessons that people opt for on OpenLearn. We operate at extraordinary scale. Many of you will be very familiar with this. This is where we are now. Worth mentioning that I used to have a presentation I used to carry around with me all the time. The sheer scepticism and, well, more than scepticism, hostility towards the concept of the Open University when it opened in 1971-72 was palpable. Harold Wilson had one member of cabinet supported it, Jenny Lee. The others, all of whom were largely Oxbridge educated, thought it was a complete waste of time and could not imagine that anyone who hadn't got to university either would be able to or would have any interest in going to university. So and I kept all the quotes and everything else. This was an idea that was literally forced through by a Prime Minister who had a passion for it and has turned into, I would say, arguably, along with the BBC, one of the greatest things that's been achieved in terms of social equity in the 20th century. We're global, extraordinary reach. And our students, the demographics of our students are changing quite interestingly. The student age actually is coming down. It's just 30, it was 33 when I started. 71% of our students work in full or part-time, 12% from ethnic minorities, 10% are disabled, very, very important component. One of the most interesting things about the graduation ceremonies I've officiated at in the last 7 years is the number of disabled students crossing the stage and the quite incredible reaction they get. The extraordinary OU graduation ceremonies are like no other in that these are all people who have grabbed a second chance and they bring their families and they absolutely are celebrations. We're quality assured, no problems there, happily. We're multi-channel, very much bring your own device. We don't insist on any specific device. We can basically get to people on whatever device they choose to be most convenient to them, and that's proving to be extraordinarily popular. The interactive book, the development of the interactive book, has been an amazing help and support to us. It's just one, iTunes U. Look at those numbers. I mean, these are numbers that I beg you to be honest with yourselves about this. These are numbers which were beyond any of our wildest dreams just a decade ago in terms of reach and use and interest. This is a world which many, many people believe is dumbing down. People are not dumbing down when they're taking that amount of trouble and that number of them are bothering to learn. And in a sense, for many of you, it will be the most interesting. The OU, one of the most popular less courses, sorry. There they are. It's very, very interesting, not necessarily what you'd expect, but in many cases, we've got another one, Introduction to China, for example, number 5. It's got far and away what we, old times used to call dropout rates. It's got the highest dropout rates. So say only 7% of students actually complete that course. But there's a reason for that. They know exactly what they want to know about China. They're either going there as a tourist, they're going there to do business. They know what they need to know. They dip in, they gather that up, and it's not about accreditation. It's about knowledge. I hope this doesn't look a bit too egocentric, but we talked about reach. I just had a really interesting lesson in the power of reach. Last June, I gave a talk in Parliament about democracy and the duty of care. Between June and February, about 12,000 people had seen it on the parliamentary site and other associated sites. On the 12th of February, it went up on the TED site. Since when, over 600,000 people have seen me wittering on about democracy. These are numbers that are completely unimaginable in my wildest dreams. So it's the balls at our feet, the opportunity is there, and I'll finish with this slide, which I profoundly believe. The fault lies not in the stars, but in ourselves, and so do all of the answers. If we're prepared to embrace this, we can transform teaching and learning, not just at school, but for all learners everywhere. Thank you very much. Questions? I'm sure I should provoke some.
Bamboozled after that. There was so much to take in there. The challenging our ideas and our attitudes. Very, very stimulating presentation, David. Thank you very much indeed for that. So I'm sure there are a few questions that are on your minds as a result of that, if anybody would like to ask a question for David before we let him go. Okay, we have a question down here at the back.
Hi David, I'm Paul.
Hi Paul.
I'd just like to know, is there a subscription with subscribing to the site, or the cost?
Which site? This, me here?
With the Open University.
Open University. Well, a lot of the courses are free. Actually, fun enough, this morning, in order to get down, I was trying very hard not to bore you. I had more slides. I've got a complete list that shows what's free and at what point you start to pay. In terms of actually the acquisition and doing the courses, that's absolutely free. You only hit any costs when you start to move into the area of accreditation. So if you then want to turn what you're learning into a BA or a master's, yes, there are costs involved. But prior to that, there are no costs at all.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you for that. Any other question? Tom has a question here in front.
David, good afternoon. Tom O'Mara from the National Adult Literacy Agency. David, in your presentation you showed us lots of things that have happened over the last number of years. What do you think is coming down the track? What are the big changes that are going to impact on education and learning for, say, the next 10 years, next decade?
I think one of the challenges, Tom, is to get across to people of all ages what the price of unemployment is likely to be by, let's say, 2030. I think if you've got both the major political parties in Ireland, for example, in your room quietly, and they weren't going to be recorded or quoted, they would both tell you that social security can only be unaffordable at present levels. And therefore, we've got a simple choice. We either get people back into productive work, or we're going to have to start making the kind of cuts that, well, the last few years have been bad enough. I think the kind of cuts that will be required will make all of us dizzy. So we need to flush out a lie, and the lie is that steady as she goes, or that we're going to somehow solve these problems without addressing the pernicious issue of unemployment. That's catastrophic. So I actually think that reality will emerge. I think we will be able to be more honest, absolutely honest, with a generation of young people, pointing out to them really what sort of lives, not just unfulfilling, but possibly even long-term hopelessness they will be looking for, because the state will not be able to afford to underpin them in the way that certainly I was brought up to believe was possible, and in fact pretty well everyone in the room there with you believed was possible. That world has gone, and that very good line of Tom Friedman's is correct. Average is over. And our job is to drill that message into a generation of young people to tell them, forget it. You will not be able to cruise on the state, but against that, it is our obligation to ensure that you are genuinely employable and better than employable, successful.
Okay, thank you. Plenty of hands going up now. I think we have a question over here.
Good morning, my name is Liz. I work in family
Hi, Liz.
literacy. I don't know if you can see us as we can see you, but I think a lot of the people here, certainly the people I can see here, are like yourself now taking notes with paper and pen rather than using digital stuff. And as I say, I work in family literacy, and a great many of the people that I would be working with are people who haven't been successful themselves in educational terms as society would see them. And how do you think that people like us, who don't have professional recognition, you were talking about the advantage, the importance of recognizing teachers and their status in society. As tutors, as adult literacy tutors, we don't have professional recognition in society at all. Much less amongst, sorry, not even to mention how we're regarded by teachers who don't know anything about us on the whole. I just was wondering how you would recommend that we can help support the parents so that they can best help support their children who are facing into this gloomy world that you are mentioning.
Well, I'd like to get one thing clear. When I say a gloomy world that I'm mentioning, it isn't that. I'm being a complete realist. And as I tried to say, because I travel, because part of the other bit of my job of being in Asia, why it's a gloomy world? It's a gloomy world because even 10 years ago, a young Irish man or woman, or a 30-year-old Irish man or woman, was basically competing with other Irish men and women for decent jobs, That's just no longer true. Every single decent job is being competed for globally. And the people that I meet in Cambodia, Vietnam in particular, Hong Kong, basically want those same jobs. These are genuinely global jobs. And unless we give our population a shot at getting them, we're going to end up at the bottom of the heap doing the jobs that other people don't want. And I don't think that's a future that anyone in Ireland particularly looks upon as desirable. Now, you've made 2 points. One is the professional recognition. The issue there is, and I'll back you to the hill, you ought to have professional recognition. But in order to have professional recognition, I think there should be some reasonable professional expectations. So, for example, you may or may not agree with me about the ability to create lesson plans. What I can promise you, and test yourself as you leave and go and have lunch, you'll find that the things you remember that I've said this morning will be very related to the quality of either the clips or the slides that I've presented. And I've tested this over and over again. I'm a relatively recent convert to this. I've been someone who's been glued to my text for over 20 years lecturing. It's a new lease of life for me and a new lease of life for my audiences that I'm now able to illustrate what I do. And it's not difficult. I go on Google Images. If I've got an idea or something I want to talk about, I go on Google Images and I find an image that illustrates it. I then put that image up on the screen and type in maybe the words that I need. It's actually a very interesting thing to do. So professional recognition, absolutely. But can I make another point? When the OU started in 1971, I think something like 30% of its first intake were teachers. And why? Because it was the first time teachers in Britain, primary secondary teachers in Britain, could actually get a degree. There was no degree for teachers. All you got was a teacher training certificate. And the OU opened up the possibility of teachers actually having degrees. And therefore, I would suggest that the mechanisms I've been illustrating and the systems I've been talking about ought to make it possible, each and every one of you, to achieve professional recognition on an established basis. But it's a two-way street. You have to want it, and you've got to be prepared to reach out and get it. Now, the last part of your question, Liz, which I think is really important, is what can you do? Well, this is a problem for me as well. I am Ireland's digital champion, and I've got three basic jobs, three bits of my remit. One is education at school and university education. One is small and medium-sized enterprises, and the other is the elderly and the disconnected being geographically disconnected, or the people who are not connected online. And my job is to find different mechanisms of encouraging people to realise how much more fulfilling and interesting their lives could be if they had even rudimentary knowledge of digital technology. And the means I'm using, for example, I'm meeting this week, talking to the owner of the Farmers Journal, going through the farmers, going through the credit unions. I'm using any device I can. I'm working with a really wonderful woman called Mary Nally. Any device I can to get to people, to get to what I call the hard to reach. And frankly, if anyone in that room has got a means of helping me to do that and helping me in the department to do that, we're up for it. Because we know that we can make people's lives more fulfilling, more interesting, and in a sense more useful and more employable if, with the rollout of broadband, and it's happening quite quickly now, over the next 18 months, with the rollout of broadband, we can also upskill the entire nation. I could go on for another hour about this, but Liz, I won't. But any ideas you've got of how we can reach the people that you teach and you deal with, we will grab at.
We're a bit short of time, so I think at this point we might just say thank you very much, David, for, giving us...
I have a question there, please.
Oh, you have one further question. Okay, sorry.
Thanks, David.
Right, one further question, David, first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, David. I'm Noel, and we've come a long way from the brick as the mobile phone, as you described. And I have 101 questions, but I just asked one. Before we leave here today as students, there's a lot of information we don't actually have. So is there any way possible that we could actually have access to your site and we could have, through NALA, please, that we could actually we could have an email or something sent away, we can actually join your site and maybe set up what the first person you were asked a question from have access to, maybe like we had right on through NALA and I completed that course and I'd like to do a course. Maybe someone else might like to do something through your site. And thanks very much for your presentation.
Not at all. What I suggest, Noel, is if someone would take responsibility for this at NALA, will contact me with, let's say, 4 key bullet points of things that would be very helpful. I'll find a connection at the OU. The OU's got a very, very good Ireland office. I'll make sure that the OU's Ireland office connects with NALA quite formally and attempts to, on the one hand, answer the difficult questions, but also creates pathways so that any student at NALA who wants to approach or deal through the OU has got some very, very easy means of doing it. That's a promise I make to you.
Okay. Thanks very much, David, and NALA will definitely progress that forward.
Very much indeed. Thanks, everybody.
And thanks a million again for giving us the benefit of your vast experience and your expertise and your knowledge. It's been a pleasure to have you here with us through our live video link this morning. So thanks again, David.
It's a pleasure. Here's where I'm speaking from. There we go. That's where I'm talking to you from. Not bad.
Lovely. Wish we were there.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye for now. Thank you. Right, well, there was plenty of food for thought, I have to say, in all of that. Plenty of... plenty to reflect on there anyway. So we'll move on because we have a gentleman here who's been waiting very patiently, and we'd like to welcome Mr. Ted Owens, who is Chief Executive Officer of Cork ETB. And Ted has been involved in education all of his career, first of all as a teacher and then as a school principal. And he joined the then County Cork VEC as Education Officer and was appointed CEO of the City of Cork VEC in 2005. And Ted's talk will cover opportunities for adult learners in a new era of further education and training. Okay, Ted, thank you. Thanks for your patience and waiting. Thank you.
Good morning to you all, or good afternoon at this stage. I took down one or two things that David Putman said. One of the things he said is, we were actively encouraged to be fearless. Now, it is just as well I'm a bit fearless myself. Because when I saw that I was following David Putman, Lord David Putman. I said, Inez Bailey is setting me up for failure. How do you follow that man? In fairness now, and as well as that, you know, with all due respects, he started at 12:10. He was supposed to finish at 12:35. I was supposed to be finished at 10 to 1, and you're supposed to be going for your lunch soon, right? So you talk about a graveyard slot. This is the graveyard slot. But I'm not going to bore you, and I mean that, because I'm not going to give a big talk on opportunities for adult learners, because nobody wants to really hear it at this stage. I will say one or two things. But first of all, was it Noel? Noel asked a question. Sorry, maybe I'm too close to that. Noel asked a question about access to David's site. Now, one of the sites he mentioned there, actually, was iTunes U. Does anybody know what iTunes U is? A few people do. Yeah, you'd want to know. He's in charge of IT in Nala, you know. You'd want to know, Tom. iTunes U is a free site. So you've all heard of, iTunes U, yeah. You've all heard of iTunes. You download music. You can go onto iTunes U. Cork ETB actually has an iTunes U site, because we persuaded Apple at the time that we were a university, which we're not. But we have an iTunes U site. Not as developed maybe as it could be yet, but you can go on to any of the top universities in the world, and their courses can be downloaded for free. Not even downloaded, you can watch those courses. So check out that website. I didn't know of the Times Educational Supplement one, but you can look up iTunes U, and if you want a course from Oxford, Cambridge, Trinity is the only Irish university up there at the moment, CIT. And they're not all, whilst they have their top university degree courses, there are other courses. But you will see from that site, there's also an iTunes school site. And again, courses of all different types are up there. And he was mentioning the downloading. Not all of we set it up for our further education colleges. We haven't used it for literacy as of yet, but certainly after this morning I'll be thinking about it, how we could use it for literacy. But not all of our FE colleges are enthusiastic as others, and we have one particular person who's really pushing it, and he talks about thousands of downloads. So I said, that's great, and just for a promotional tool, because it was as kind of a promotional tool in the sense I even established the iTunes U site. I said, isn't it great to think that there are thousands of people, is it in Cork or is it in Munster, I wondered, are actually downloading some of our programs. And I asked for, because it can be done now with you know, any of these digital things, I asked for a breakdown of where were the downloads coming from. They were from China, they were coming from Brazil, South America, all over the world. But like, it's just amazing. But the resources are there. But that was David Putman's message, and you would be surprised. Now, maybe he lost people a small bit when he was talking about, you know, you can use cutting apps and you can do this to put classes together. I have a little girl with Down syndrome, and I have an iPad, and she uses the iPad. In fact, she has her own iPad now, because it was a school, it was a business iPad I had for a stay, and I brought it home, and she's playing on it all the time. But I see her on an app called, I think, Explain Everything, is it, Tom? Is it? Explain Everything. And she's cutting, pasting, taking photographs in from her own, you know, no, well, she's not a young girl anymore, she's 20 years of age, I suppose, but she was doing that when she, you know, when I got an iPad 2 or 3 years ago. So it can be done. And I think the other challenge that he put for us today, we all looked at the teacher who was, you know, bored people to tears. I mean, we all have to ask ourselves, what is our own practice like? Are we boring people to tears? And I think that was another challenge. It was a challenge for me in any case. I should have welcomed you all to Cork. Tá fáilte go léir go dtí Cork Corky nach únta chun Carry agus mar sin de. I know that you've travelled from all over the world at this stage, well, from over Ireland, so I better push on slightly. I was at a conference this morning in Killarney, but I'm now here. I was at another seminar during the week, and I was taught a very, very good lesson. before I start talking about SOLACE and ETBs, etc., etc. And we had 80 people from our service in Cork together. We had learners, thanks be to God. No, we had learners, I'd have been in trouble otherwise. But we had tutors, we had caretakers, cleaners, principals, and we were talking to one of the students. Well, sorry, they were working in tables, and you know they were being asked. We were talking about vision and guiding principles and values of the service. And one of the students, fair play to her, said that she had never heard of the ETB, and she was being nice when she said, and she thought she had heard something about VEC at one stage, but she wasn't sure what the VEC was, right? Now, in fairness to Nala, I have to congratulate you and compliment you, but in terms of branding and marketing, you've done a great job in that particular area. When people think of literacy in Ireland, I'd love them to think of their local ETB, but they're probably thinking Nala. So, well done. Keep up the good work. I was going to leave the praise to the end. I think you're doing a great job as an organisation in terms of advocacy, in terms of, you know, in terms of development of materials as well. But as an organisation, I'd like to compliment you. Job you've done, and I know that you're very much a collective, and it's not just the executive up in Dublin or those who worked until recently out of our Cork offices, but I do realise it's a collective, and that strength is in the collective. But well done, and keep up the good work. And because of your efforts, I do believe that there will be opportunities for adult learners as we go forward. I think most of you might know what an ETB is. VECs amalgamated to become an ETB. In Cork, since the 1st of July, we're also responsible for all training. FÁS in Cork no longer exists. It's a pity that in some parts of the country, they think that FÁS has been replaced by this gang called SOLACE, and that is the situation outside of Cork, Dublin and Kerry. SOLACE is the provider for another few months, but in terms of SOLACE, think of SOLACE as you would think of the Higher Education Authority or the HEA. SOLACE will fund ETBs who will be the providers of further education and training. So they will plan, fund and coordinate. But it is the ETB, and it's a huge responsibility, will be responsible for all further education and training outside of really what happens in universities. Certainly all publicly funded will come through the ETB. Now, 80% of FÁS training was contracted training, and there will continue to be a contracted training sector, but again, it will be funded by the ETB. The other thing that struck me most, and I don't know if she's here, I don't think she is, so even if she was, I'd use the example, that struck me most forcibly during the week was I was part of one of the small roundtable discussions, and we had to turn around and we had to interview whoever we found we were sitting next to. And I mentioned her name now, Breed Murphy, who's one of our adult literacy organisers. I happened to be sitting next to Breed. And I had to interview her for 5 minutes and ask her how did she become involved in her current job, who was she, what she was doing. And I heard one of the greatest, I don't know, testimonies for literacy and numeracy, and for working in the literacy and numeracy area that I've ever heard of. And it made a huge impression on me, and it certainly reminded me of, like, we're a big ETB. We'll have a budget of about 200 million. We have 30 schools, we have large FE colleges, we have 12 youth reach centres, and I would be honest, there is a danger in that kind of a big setup that literacy and our literacy service could become very much a Cinderella part of the organisation. Now, I know that NALA are trying to ensure that that won't happen at national level, and I know, and I welcome Nuala Glanton, our Adult Education Officer here today. I know that Nuala, and I see Mary Chambers, I see, yeah, and I see Cathy, and I see Mary Ryder. I better stop at this stage. But I know that these people in Cork will ensure that it won't happen in our ETB. But when I spoke to Breed during the week, she told me, and I didn't know this, that she started as a teacher in one of our schools, as an art teacher in one of our schools, a school in a disadvantaged area of the city and in a challenging environment. And she felt that while she was making a contribution to the individual pupils, that really she felt she needed to make a contribution beyond that, not just to the pupils, but to their families as well. And she got involved as a voluntary tutor in the literacy area. She subsequently got married, they had children, and stopped teaching. But she told me that when she wanted to return, she felt the greatest area that she could contribute to people and to their lives would be as a literacy tutor rather than a teacher, and took that career decision. So there was a question about professionalism, and there was a question about status. It was great for me to hear of somebody who took a conscious decision, and obviously she's a qualified teacher, but she wanted to teach in the area of literacy and numeracy because she felt she could make a greater contribution. So it was a great reminder for me that as we go forward as an ETB, and it's up to you in your own ETB areas to be your own advocates, but certainly as a result of my experiences during the week, I feel that we have a huge contribution and we've got to make that contribution. Solis, I think, will publish on Monday their further education and training strategy document. I know they said they'd publish it in March, and it's 31st is Monday, I think, and I think they are going to make that particular deadline. I think that the establishment of Solis is something to be welcomed by adult learners. There's huge fear out there. I happened to be at a conference last night, and I met Fiona Hartley, I think she's Assistant General Secretary of Solis. She's a person who would be a great, well, Inez would know her well, she would be a great advocate for literacy and for numeracy and community education and the adult learners. And I know that Fiona has a central role in the development of that strategy. Solis is painted as the big baddie. Certainly painted by some ETBs as the big baddie. But I believe that the fact that there is no one national body whose role is to promote further education and training, I think that can only be good for the sector. We've had a very active university lobby in this country. Hopefully, we now will have a powerful lobby for further education and training. One of the big criticisms at the moment, and one of the things that I know that NALA have been attempting to do, and Cork as an ETB and other ETBs have been trying to ensure, is that the emphasis is very, very much at the moment on labour market activation, lowering the numbers on the live register, and our education sector of the FET believes that the emphasis, and they're afraid that the emphasis is going to be on training and training for employment to the detriment of learning. I don't believe that that will be the case. Without doubt, there is an emphasis, as I said, on labour market activation, pathways to work. It's very much a government agenda at the moment. The 16 CEOs of ETBs, we meet on a monthly basis now with the Secretary General and half of his Assistant General Secretaries in the department, on a monthly basis. We were brought to a gathering recently where not only the Secretary General of the Department of Education was there, but the Secretary General of DSB and half the DSB senior officials and Enterprise, Trade and Employment. We got an email on Friday to say that the Taoiseach wants to meet the 16 CEOs of ETBs. And the emphasis is very much, as I said, on what are we doing to get people into work. But our AEOs, our education officers, our principals, our tutors are certainly have made their voices heard over the last few months in pointing out to us that not everything can be measured so precisely, and that it's not all about how many enter employment, how many progress. The emphasis isn't even as much on progression to education. There is very much an emphasis on long-term unemployed. And we have been given targets across our services. We've been given targets in adult literacy as to the percentage of long-term unemployed, not just unemployed, long-term unemployed that are availing of our courses. And there are a lot of people unemployed, and I think that's a legitimate enough campaign or priority of government. But certainly the sector has been stressing the fact that just because somebody comes along and engages with a literacy service, the outcome might not necessarily be that they have now gained employment. No, if that's one of their reasons for engaging with us first day, well and good. But what we're really talking about is trying to help people to prepare themselves for inclusion, because those of the learners who are here today will know that without literacy and numeracy skills, you can be excluded not just from jobs but from society. So we will be looking and demanding a ring fencing of a budget for adult literacy, for community education, and we'll be insisting that we're not afraid of measurement, by the way. But, as I said, we are pointing out that not everything can be measured in terms of whether or not people now have a job. I was glad that the question came up about the professionalism or otherwise of the profession. I know that NALA realises that we owe it to our learners, and I certainly think that in Cork ETB we can be quite proud of the efforts that we are making to continuously upskill our tutors to ensure that they have, if at all possible, a professional qualification. And I do believe that the more people we can have educated or trained as tutors, the better service we'll provide. I had a discussion recently with our adult education officers who pointed out very strongly to me that they believed that, well, they wanted to ensure, as we are moving into a new organisation, that tutors, be it in community education, or in adult literacy, or in our youth reach centres, are not seen in any way as second-class citizens in comparison with our teachers in our schools and colleges. And again, and it was reinforced during the week by my experience, that is not the way that we look at people. No, we do realise that people come along as volunteers, make a huge contribution as volunteers, and have no great wish to progress as, you know, as a pathway, so to speak, in terms of a career. But we also believe that those people, that once we've encouraged them into the service, we've got to try and do everything to ensure that they are upskilled, so that they do provide for learners a quality experience. We're very conscious of the need to try and integrate literacy and numeracy into all our services, and we are encouraged by the work that NALA is doing in that area. And I know that they're working very closely with ETBI and with the Department of Education and Skills to try and ensure that literacy and numeracy are integrated into all our services, and it's not just seen as something that is out there for a particular cohort. The PIAC figures showed there is still a problem, there is still a challenge in Ireland, and not everybody is necessarily going to knock at the door of the literacy service and look for help. But as educators, we should be able to ensure that no matter what part of our services they engage with, that we are conscious that people need some help and need some support in that area. I was going to go on at that stage and congratulate NALA for the work they've done. I think I've already done it. I don't in any way want to sound patronising. I meant what I said.